According to Casey Johnson of NBC Chicago, the Utah Jazz might be trading for Zach LaVine. Let's talk about it. It's the Hoops Nerd Show. All right, guys, this report about Zach LaVine is interesting, and I have some ideas of what's actually going on, some educated guesses. Let's talk about whether this is even possible, what's going on, and then let's talk a little bit about the fit. So, one thing about this report is it sounds like the Jazz are in these discussions about Zach LaVine. I would say this sounds a lot more to me, and this is based off of an educated guess, some things I have heard. But this sounds a lot more like the Chicago Bulls are calling the Utah Jazz, asking them their interest in this player. This does not sound like something where the Jazz are calling Chicago and asking about Zach LaVine. It's the other way around. Chicago is out there trying to make moves. We already know that they've made this move to trade for Josh Giddey by trading Alex Caruso to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're out making moves, and it's obvious that they're trying to make some sort of move to get Zach LaVine off their books to either improve their team, or maybe they're trying to just break things down for the draft and Cooper Flag and things like that. But they're out making calls. I really, really doubt that Utah called the Chicago Bulls about Zach LaVine from things I've heard. It's more likely they are calling them and trying to figure out what their interest is. And we know that Utah does their due diligence on all these things. We know there were trade rumors about the Jazz with Miles Bridges. We know there were trade rumors about the Jazz and DeJounte Murray and their connection to the Hawks and things like that. That didn't really pan out to anything. It means Utah likely had those teams calling them and just asking. Miles Bridges, they were probably calling Utah and asking what their interest would be. Or, maybe the Jazz called them, but from things I've heard, I just don't think the Jazz are making this many calls out there. I think, and the thing is all these teams talk to each other all the time. And so my guess is Chicago called Utah, asked them what their interest would be in Zach LaVine. There are some bad contracts on the Jazz. The John Collins contract is way too big. They also have the Jordan Clarkson contract where he did not play well last year. So the Jazz have like $35 million tied up in those two players next season, but that still doesn't add up to like the $45 million that makes up the Zach LaVine contract, and it's going to get even bigger. And so I just think this is a lot of nothing for the Utah Jazz. Now, in terms of fit, if let's say the Jazz were able to just trade Jordan Clarkson and John Collins and trade two bad contracts for one enormous bad contract in Zach LaVine, and now you have Zach LaVine and the Jazz tried to renegotiate. Well, not try to. It's a very big possibility that they could renegotiate Lauri Markkanen in August. It seems like something they want to do, or is possible that it could happen. We'll see if it does. It's a long time till August, by the way. It's day one that these things can happen, and we've already got big moves happening. But let's say they trade for Zach LaVine, and now your team is Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen. You keep Colin Sexton, you have Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks. Does it make a ton of sense? Zach LaVine is going to play, as well as Lauri Markkanen. That means you're not getting more minutes for Taylor Hendricks. And then I guess you're going Walker Kessler at center. How good is that basketball team? You haven't improved your defense. Yes, you've gotten off some of those contracts, but now you're playing Walker Kessler 32 minutes, and he had a bad season last year. Maybe Walker Kessler improves, but then what it does is it ties up all your money in those two players. So you're basically building around Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen. How good is that team? Is that a team that's good enough that's going to make Lauri Markkanen happy? Maybe, but he has not been a player that has taken the Chicago Bulls to another level. He has gotten all the opportunities, all the shots he wants. And how good has Chicago been in a bad Eastern Conference? Is that really the team you want? You become what, a C basketball team after being a D basketball team last year? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And then if your goal is flexibility in this offseason and in future offseasons, you can't do a lot because he's making between 45 and 50 million over the next 3 years. So you can't trade players into cap. you can't trade him to other teams because his contract's so big, it only fits with them aggregating players. And let's say you want to trade him to a contender, they have to trade you a player that matches his value. For example, if there's a team over the second apron, like the Boston Celtics, you can't aggregate contracts. It gets really hard to trade the player. And that's why Chicago's been trying to trade him for so long. So it doesn't make sense for flexibility. It doesn't make a ton of sense for being a high-level championship contender basketball team. And then it doesn't make sense in terms of developing your youth. He's taking minutes away from Taylor Hendricks. He's going to play a lot of minutes. And so there's not a lot here. And he's going to take shots from Keontae George and whoever you get in the draft this year. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I would be really surprised if this happens. I mean, I guess it could. Maybe these reports mean there's more there than we think, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't see this happening. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Should the Jazz trade for Zach LaVine? Is this a whole lot of nothing? Let me know in the comments. I'll talk to you next time.